I was 34 years old when a doctor destroyed everything I thought I knew about myself with a single sentence. And then, 3 months later, that same doctor sat across from me in a dimly lit coffee shop, hands trembling, and told me why he had lied. What he revealed that night didn't just change my understanding of my family. It changed my understanding of love, sacrifice, and the impossible choices that some people make to protect the ones they care about. But I need to take you back to the beginning. I need you to understand what it felt like to walk into that hospital room as one person and walk out as someone entirely different. Someone with no past, no foundation, no sense of who I really was. Let me tell you something first. There's a moment in everyone's life when the ground beneath their feet disappears. When everything you believe to be true, everything you built your identity upon, crumbles into dust. For some people, it's a betrayal by a loved one. For others, it's a secret revealed too late. For me, it was 7 words spoken in a hospital hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear. He is not your biological father. 7 words. That's all it took to erase 34 years of certainty. My name is Rebecca Morrison. At least, that's the name I grew up with. I was raised in a small town called Cedar Falls, about 40 miles outside of Nashville, Tennessee. It's the kind of place where everybody knows your business before you do. The kind of place where you can't walk into the grocery store without running into 3 people who watched you grow up, who remember when you fell off your bike in 2nd grade and scraped your knee so bad you needed 12 stitches. My father, Thomas Morrison, was a quiet man. He wasn't the type to give speeches or command attention when he walked into a room. But there was something about his presence that made you feel safe. He had these deep brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and hands that were rough from decades of honest work but gentle enough to braid my hair when I was a little girl. He worked at the local hardware store for 37 years. 37 years of showing up early, staying late, helping customers find the right screw or the right piece of lumber for their projects. He never complained, never asked for recognition. He just showed up, day after day, because that's who he was. Reliable. Steady. Present. My mother, Linda, passed when I was only 11. Breast cancer. I remember the way my father held her hand at the end, the way he whispered things in her ear that I couldn't hear. After she was gone, he sat in their bedroom for 3 days. He didn't eat. He barely moved. I brought him sandwiches that he didn't touch and glasses of water that sat untouched on the nightstand. On the 4th day, he emerged. His eyes were red and swollen, but there was something different in them. Determination. Resolve. "It's just you and me now, Becca Bug," he said, pulling me into his arms. "And I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to make your mama proud." He kept that promise. Every single day. He taught me how to fish in the creek behind our house, how to bait a hook and cast a line and wait patiently for the tug that meant you'd caught something. He taught me how to change a tire, insisting that every woman should know how to take care of herself on the road. He taught me how to stand up for myself when the world tried to push me down, how to look someone in the eye and speak my truth even when my voice was shaking. I loved that man more than I loved breathing. So when the doctors told us he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, I felt like someone had reached inside my chest and ripped out everything that mattered. We had maybe 6 months, they said. Maybe less. The cancer was aggressive. It had already spread. I remember the drive home from that appointment. Dad was quiet, staring out the window at the passing fields and farmhouses. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, trying not to cry, trying to be strong for him. "You know," he said finally, his voice soft, "your mother used to love this drive." She said the way the light hit the fields in the late afternoon reminded her of honey. I couldn't speak. There was a lump in my throat the size of a fist. "She's waiting for me, Becca Bug," he continued. "And I'm not scared to go to her. I just hate the thought of leaving you alone. You won't, I managed to choke out. I'll be okay, Dad. I promise. But I wasn't sure if that was true. I quit my job in Chicago. I was working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-size advertising firm, nothing special, nothing I couldn't walk away from. I packed up my apartment, said goodbye to my friends, and moved back home to Cedar Falls. I spent every single day by his side. We watched old westerns together, the ones he loved as a kid. We looked through photo albums and told stories about Mom, about his childhood on the farm, about the time he got kicked out of the county fair for trying to sneak a pig into the talent show. I tried to memorize everything about him. The sound of his laugh, which was more like a wheeze by then because his lungs were getting weaker. The way he called me Becca-bug, like he had since I was 3 years old. The smell of his aftershave, Old Spice, which he'd worn every day since before I was born. It was during one of his hospital stays that everything fell apart. His blood counts had dropped dangerously low. He needed a transfusion, and I immediately volunteered. I'm his daughter, I told the nurse. I should be a match. Take whatever you need. She smiled at me kindly, the way people smile at you when someone you love is dying and there's nothing they can do about it. She took my blood for testing and told me they'd let me know. I sat by my father's bed, holding his frail hand, telling him stories about my life in Chicago. About the apartment with the leaky faucet that my landlord never fixed. About the stray cat that used to wait for me on the fire escape every morning, meowing until I gave him some of my breakfast. About the man I'd dated for 6 months before realizing he was more in love with his job than he'd ever be with me. Dad smiled at me with those tired eyes, and I thought, we're going to get through this. We have to. 3 hours later, a doctor I had never seen before walked into the room. He was tall, maybe mid-50s, with gray hair and glasses that sat crookedly on his nose. His white coat was slightly wrinkled, and there was a coffee stain on his sleeve that he either hadn't noticed or didn't care about. His name tag said Dr. Richard Calloway. He asked to speak with me privately. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. I kissed my father's forehead, told him I'd be right back, and followed the doctor into the hallway. Ms. Morrison, he said, his voice low and clinical, like he was reading from a script. I'm afraid there's been a discovery during the blood typing process. A discovery? I asked. What kind of discovery? Is something wrong with my blood? He finally looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that I didn't understand. It almost looked like guilt. Or maybe fear. At the time, I couldn't tell the difference. The blood work shows that you and Mr. Morrison are not biologically related, he said. He is not your biological father. I remember laughing. Actually laughing out loud in that sterile hospital hallway, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the distant sound of a PA system calling for a doctor. That's impossible, I said. There must be some mistake. Run the test again. We ran it 3 times, he said. There's no mistake. I'm sorry. The world tilted. The fluorescent lights above me seemed to flicker and buzz, and I had to press my hand against the cold wall to keep from falling. My legs felt like they'd turned to water, and there was a ringing in my ears that wouldn't stop. That doesn't make any sense, I whispered. I look just like him. Everyone says I have his eyes. Sometimes we see what we want to see, Dr. Calloway said. And then he walked away. Just like that. He dropped a bomb on my entire existence and walked away like he had just told me the cafeteria was out of Jell-O. I stood in that hallway for what felt like hours. Nurses walked past me, some giving me sympathetic looks, others too busy to notice the woman having an existential crisis against the wall. Doctors rushed by with clipboards and stethoscopes. Somewhere, a machine was beeping rhythmically, counting out someone else's heartbeats. And I just stood there, frozen, trying to figure out who I was if I wasn't Thomas Morrison's daughter. Everything I knew about myself was connected to him. My work ethic, learned from watching him never miss a day of work in 37 years. My stubbornness, inherited from a man who once spent 3 weeks fixing an old tractor just because someone told him it couldn't be done. My love of bad westerns and worse puns. If he wasn't my father, who was I? I didn't tell him. How could I? He was dying. The last thing he needed was to see the confusion and hurt in my eyes, to answer questions about a past he might not want to discuss. What was I supposed to say? Hey Dad, before you die, can you explain why my DNA says you're not my father? So I smiled. I held his hand. I told him I loved him. And every night, I went back to his empty house and cried until I couldn't breathe. I started looking for evidence. I went through boxes of old photographs, searching for some clue, some hint that my mother might have had an affair. I looked at pictures of myself as a baby, as a toddler, as a gap-toothed kid missing her 2 front teeth. In every single one, I was in my father's arms. In every single one, he was looking at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. I found my parents' wedding album, yellowed with age. My mother was beautiful in her simple white dress, and my father looked so young, so nervous, so in love. They'd been together since high school. Everyone in town knew their story. Had it all been a lie? I found letters my father had written to my mother during the brief time he'd been in the army, before I was born. They were beautiful, full of longing and devotion. I miss you more than I knew it was possible to miss another person, one letter read. When I close my eyes, I see your face. When I dream of our future together. I'm counting the days until I can come home and hold you again. These weren't the letters of a man who would forgive an affair. These weren't the words of someone who could raise another man's child and never mention it. Nothing made sense. He passed away 6 weeks later. I was holding his hand when it happened. His breathing had been getting shallower all day, and the nurses had told me it wouldn't be long. I sat beside him, stroking his hair, telling him it was okay to let go. Your mama's waiting, I whispered, even though it broke my heart to say it. It's okay, Dad. You can go to her now. His eyes fluttered open one last time. He looked at me, and for a moment, he was completely lucid. Completely present. You're my greatest gift, Beckabug, he said, his voice barely audible. You always were. And then he was gone. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe that whatever biological truth existed, it didn't change what we had. But the doubt had already taken root. It was growing inside me like a weed, choking out all the beautiful memories and replacing them with questions. Who was I? Who was my real father? Did my mother have an affair? Did Dad know? Did he raise me as his own even though I wasn't? And if so, why didn't he ever tell me? I spent months searching for answers. I did a DNA test through one of those ancestry websites. I searched through my mother's old belongings, looking for letters, photographs, anything that might explain the truth. I found nothing except more evidence that my parents had loved each other deeply and completely. I started having nightmares. In them, I would be standing at my father's grave, and he would rise up out of the earth and look at me with cold, empty eyes. You're not mine, he would say in these dreams. You were never mine. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, reaching for a man who was no longer there. I stopped eating. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped answering phone calls from concerned relatives who wanted to check on me. I was drowning in grief and doubt, and I didn't know how to save myself. And then, one day, I received a message on the Ancestry website. It was from Dr. Richard Calloway. I stared at his name on my screen for a full 5 minutes before I opened the message. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll down. "Miss Morrison," it read. "I need to speak with you. It's about what I told you at the hospital. I wasn't entirely truthful. Please, if you can find it in your heart, meet me. I owe you an explanation." My first instinct was to delete the message and block him forever. This man had shattered my world with his words. Why should I give him another chance to hurt me? But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the desperate hope that he could give me some closure, some answer that would help me put the pieces back together. Maybe I just needed to look him in the eye and ask him why. I agreed to meet him. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Nashville, neutral territory. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the place was mostly empty except for a few college students with laptops and an elderly couple sharing a piece of pie. I chose a table in the back corner, where I could see the door. He walked in exactly at 3 o'clock. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. His hair had gotten grayer, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The guilt I had seen in his eyes at the hospital was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Fear, maybe. Or shame. "Thank you for coming," he said as he sat down across from me. He ordered a black coffee with trembling hands. "You have 5 minutes," I replied coldly. "Start talking." He took a deep breath. I watched his chest rise and fall. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Rebecca, I lied to you. Thomas Morrison is your biological father. The blood test proved it. I told you he wasn't because I was paid to." The coffee shop seemed to go silent. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. The college students disappeared. The elderly couple faded away. There was only me and this man and the words he had just spoken. "What did you just say?" "Someone paid me to tell you that Thomas wasn't your father," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "They wanted you to doubt him. They wanted you to spend your final weeks with him questioning everything instead of just being his daughter." I felt like I was going to be sick. My stomach turned over, and I had to grip the edge of the table to keep myself upright. "Who?" I demanded. "Who paid you? Why would anyone do something so cruel?" Dr. Calloway's hands were shaking so badly that he had to set down his coffee cup. He spilled some on the table, but he didn't seem to notice. "Your father had a brother," he said. "Robert Morrison. They had a falling out decades ago, something about an inheritance from your grandparents. Robert was cut out of the will entirely, and he never forgave your father for it." I knew about Uncle Robert. Vaguely. Dad had mentioned him once or twice, always with a sadness in his voice that made me uncomfortable. He said Robert had made some bad choices, had gotten involved with some bad people. They hadn't spoken in over 20 years. Once, when I was about 13, I asked Dad why I never saw my uncle. He got quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was different. Harder. "Some people carry so much bitterness inside them that it poisons everything they touch," he said. "Robert couldn't let go of the past, and it destroyed any chance we had of being a family. I hope you never become that kind of person, Becca Bug. I hope you learn to forgive." I hadn't thought about that conversation in years. But now, sitting across from the man who had stolen the last weeks I had with my father, it came rushing back. "Robert found out your father was dying," Dr. Calloway continued. "He saw it as his last chance for revenge. He couldn't take away your father's money or his house or his legacy. But he could take away the one thing that mattered most to him. You. Your love. Your trust. So he paid you to lie to me," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "He paid you to make me doubt my own father on his deathbed." "Yes," Dr. Calloway said. "And I took the money. I was in debt, Rebecca. Deep debt. Gambling. I'd been betting on sports for years, thinking I could win my way out of trouble, and instead I just dug myself deeper and deeper. I was about to lose my house, my car, everything. Robert offered me $50,000 to tell you that lie, and I was desperate enough to take it. He was crying now. Tears streaming down his weathered face, pooling in the wrinkles around his eyes. I've never hated myself more than I did the moment I walked away from you in that hallway, he said. I went home that night and sat in my garage with the car running. I was going to end it all. But I was too much of a coward even for that. I didn't feel sorry for him. I couldn't. This man had robbed me of something I could never get back. Those final 6 weeks with my father, tainted by doubt. Those final conversations, shadowed by questions I was too afraid to ask. His last words to me, "You're my greatest gift," and my inability to fully believe them because of the poison this man had put in my mind. "I want to scream at you," I said, my voice deadly calm. "I want to flip this table over and break every bone in your face. I want to find Robert Morrison and do even worse to him." "I know," he whispered. "I deserve all of it. But more than anything," I continued, my voice cracking, "I want those 6 weeks back. I want to look at my father without the doubt in my heart. I want to hold his hand without wondering if he was really mine. Can you give me that? Can you give me back the time you stole?" He couldn't answer. He just sat there, crying into his cold coffee, a broken man who had broken me in turn. I left him there. I walked out of that coffee shop and into the Nashville afternoon, and I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, until people on the street stopped to stare at me, until a police officer approached and asked if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I wasn't sure I would ever be okay again. But as the days passed and the rage began to subside, something else emerged. A strange kind of peace. My father was my father. Biologically, legally, spiritually. He was mine, and I was his. No amount of lies or manipulation could change that. Robert Morrison had tried to steal my father's legacy. He had tried to poison our bond with doubt and suspicion. But he had failed. Because even in my darkest moments, even when I questioned everything, I had still loved my father. I had still sat by his bedside. I had still held his hand as he took his last breath. Robert couldn't take that away. No one could. I decided not to confront Robert directly. Part of me wanted to, desperately. I wanted to look him in the eye and ask him how he could do something so cruel to his own brother, to his own niece. But a bigger part of me realized that revenge would only give him more power over my life. He wanted me to hate. He wanted me to become as bitter and poisoned as he was. Instead, I chose to honor my father's memory by being the person he raised me to be. Kind. Honest. Forgiving. I reported Dr. Calloway to the state medical board. Not out of revenge, but because someone who could be bought to destroy a family had no business practicing medicine. He lost his license. I heard later that he checked himself into a rehabilitation center for gambling addiction. He sent me a letter a year later, thanking me for holding him accountable. He said it was the wake-up call he needed to turn his life around. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive him. Forgiveness is a process, not a destination. But I've made peace with what happened. The truth is, family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, who love you unconditionally, who teach you how to fish and change a tire and stand up for yourself. My father did all of that and more. He was my dad in every way that mattered, and no lie, no manipulation, no cruel act of revenge can ever take that away from me. I still visit his grave every Sunday. I bring him flowers, usually daisies because they were Mom's favorite. I sit on the grass beside his headstone and tell him about my life. I got married 2 years after he passed. His name is James, and he's a good man. Steady. reliable, present. All the things my father taught me to value. When James proposed to me, I said yes through tears, wishing Dad could have been there to see it. We're expecting a baby girl in the spring. I'm going to name her Linda Thomas, after both of my parents. And every time I feel that little girl kick inside me, I think about my dad. I think about how he would have loved being a grandfather. I think about the stories he would have told her, the fishing trips he would have planned, the silly nicknames he would have invented. He would have been amazing. I carry him with me everywhere I go now. Not just in my memories, but in my DNA, in the blood that runs through my veins and will run through my daughter's veins. We are connected in a way that transcends death, transcends lies, transcends everything. And that's the real truth. That's the thing Robert Morrison and Dr. Richard Calloway could never understand. Love isn't fragile. It doesn't shatter at the first sign of doubt. It bends, it stretches, it survives things that seem impossible. My father loved me. I loved him. And that love carried us through his final days, even when I was secretly questioning everything. It carries me still, every single day. If you're watching this and you've ever doubted where you come from, who your family is, whether you truly belong, I want you to know something. The people who love you, who show up for you, who hold your hand through the hardest moments of your life, those are your people. Blood matters, but love matters more. And if there's someone in your life who has been your rock, your foundation, your greatest gift, tell them. Tell them today. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't let doubt or pride or fear stop you from saying the words that matter most. I love you. Thank you for being my family. I said those words to my father before he died. I just wish I had said them more often. I wish I had said them without the shadow of doubt in my heart. But I know he heard me. And I know he understood. He was my father. He always was. And he always will be. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own family and the people who matter most to you, I hope you'll take a moment to share your thoughts. Tell me in the comments about the person who has been your greatest gift. What did they teach you? How did they shape who you are today? And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about family, truth, and the unbreakable bonds that hold us together, make sure you're part of this journey. We're all in this together, and your story matters just as much as mine. Until next time, take care of the people you love. And let them take care of you.